Can you see any scenario where American boots get on the ground in Iran?
Zero from my perspective. I will not vote to send American kids to Iran. I think it's a terrible mistake. Every war is not our war. Our country is bankrupting itself over our own obligations to our own people. We should not ever send one soldier to Iran. And I hope I'm pretty clear on that.
You could not have been clearer.
I just want to address a point he said before we move on, because contrary to what I said, he keeps saying that Iran's not a threat to America. So since Scott decided to become Iran's mouthpiece, can you please clarify for me what Khomeini means when he says death to America, death to the West, and forceful conversions? Can you translate in the language that you so clearly understand that all of us are missing? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, Khomeini died in 1989. You don't know what you're talking about. Second of all, the chant, you'll notice, all of y'all in the audience and on the panel notice how often the Hawks bring this up and how much heavy lifting these chants are doing. Are you so terrified of chants? In fact, they have no Air Force, they have no Navy, they have no ability, they have no offensive force that they can threaten this country with. So in other words, you're saying you're really upset because they're hurting your feelings by some stupid chant, which of course is terrible politics, and it's a terrible government, but it's not a threat to this country.
When somebody wants to kill you and they are going to kill you, you stop it before it gets too late. No, you are naive. It's okay.
America could have normalized relations with Iran 30 years ago.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You know, as much as the mainstream news and all the Democrats and everybody, they just get out there and they talk about how much they dislike Donald Trump and he's a fascist and he's a Nazi and he's a terrorist and he's all these other things. I don't think that's the case. I think they just love to hate the man because it puts money in their pockets, folks. They love money in their pockets. Doesn't everybody love money in their pockets? Welcome back to another Piers Morgan Uncensored reaction, where we debate opinions and everybody is wrong 100% of the time and everybody is right 100% of the time and nothing makes any sense. And Piers Morgan just gets in the background, just fingering everybody, if you will, pushing buttons and whatnot. We gotta love it, y'all. But before we get into the debate, and this is a hot topic, by the way, everybody's talking about what's going on in Iran. Y'all smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. That would be greatly appreciated. If you don't mind, share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. That's the #1 way, actually, to help this channel grow, is to share. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody you know, tell your grandma, tell your neighbor, tell the guy across the street as well. Make sure and do that for me. And if you would be so inclined, I would be greatly appreciative if you look right below the video and click that join button. Sign up, become a member, help me grow this movement, help me get the news to you guys. And without any further ado, let's get it, y'all.
And the really big unknown is no one's quite sure where President Trump himself stands. He's been a man who has persistently for decades espoused peace, not war. He thinks wars are bad for human life, bad for business. He's certainly been very keen to try and end the war in Gaza, end the war in Ukraine. And yet, from all the reports that are coming out today from Washington, the war jungle drums appear to be beating ever louder from the White House. And it looks more likely than not that Donald Trump may bring America into this war against Iran, siding with Israel, of course. Many people on the MAGA right are saying that's not what we voted for. You know, Tucker Carlson and others leading the charge here. Is that what people voted for?
I think the president's instincts and his public pronouncements have typically been of restraint, have typically been of the unintended consequences of either regime change or war. He acknowledged that the Afghan war cost a lot of money, got into nation building, and didn't necessarily come with a great outcome. Same with the Iraq war. He was a persistent critic of the Iraq war, as I and others have been. And so I think when you look at it, that the overwhelming presentation of foreign policy has been for more restraint and less intervention and cautious. I would say, though, if you look at his pronouncements over years, that sometimes Iran has been an exception and Israel has been an exception to the rule. And so that's what's unknown here, is there's a significant lobbying movement for the war. There's a, huge number of congressmen and senators who would like to see the war engaged. believe that war will lead to a great outcome and it'll be just peachy keen and rosy. And I'm one who warns of the repercussions of the chaos of war, the cost of the war. I don't see the U.S. occupying Iran. I don't see Israel occupying Iran. What happens in this large country once there is either no government? I also think there's a very good chance that most authoritarian governments don't sit passively by. Many people argue that their primary concern now will be control of their own people and less the ability to strike back at Israel. They may not. They are striking back to show that they can. It has not been largely effective, and Israel has been largely effective. But I think now their concern will turn towards, are there any among us who would try to take over? And so internal control of their people, I think, will be paramount to Iran. But the big question is, will they rush onto the bomb, to the development of the nuclear bomb because of this, or will they just give up in the face of military defeat?
Do you find it slightly baffling that Israel it continues to refuse to say whether it has nuclear weapons itself, when most people assume that they have quite an extensive nuclear arsenal, and they're not open and don't allow themselves to be open to any checks and balances on any nuclear defense they may have?
Well, I mean, the thing is if it is justified for Israel to attack Iran because they might get a nuclear weapon, is the reverse true? And so the thing is, nobody would ask that, and I'm not saying that it is true, but I'm saying that if it's okay for one nation to attack another to stop them from getting nuclear weapons, would the reverse be true? So I really think that, there's a different standard. The standards are different. The overriding sort of, I think, conclusion from this, though, is that if you want peace in the Middle East, it has to involve more players. Like, for example, if you want peace in Gaza and you want Gaza to be resolved, Gaza can't be resolved with no government and no police force in there, but it can't be resolved with American troops, can't be resolved with Israeli troops in there. They're in there, but they're fighting a war. When the war is finally completed and all that's left is rubble, how does Gaza recover? I think it only recovers with an Arab force. And I've been suggesting for years that the Arab League needs to be more active. They need to be chomping at the bit. They need to be pushing Israel to end the war. And they need to say, we will provide 10,000 soldiers from 10 different countries, Arab-speaking Muslim countries, that will come in and provide the peace.
I just love how Piers starts this off, and a lot of pundits are doing this. They're starting it off with a conclusory statement. Is this what you voted for? Trump hasn't done anything yet, for crying out loud. We're not in a war. Everybody is pretending like the conclusion we've already reached. We've already started the war, and it's going to end exactly the same as Iraq did. They're already concluding this before we've even done anything. He's just making threats right now. That's what Trump does. You ever read Trump's book, by the way? It's called The Big Ask. Right? It might not be the exact same thing, but it's a similar playbook to what Trump is doing right here. He's putting out all of his cards, or at least he's wanting you to think he's putting out all of his cards. As a matter of fact, my next video, we're going to cover another position to this, a little furtherance of the big ask. Maybe it's just the rest of the puzzle pieces falling into place or whatever, but we're going to get into that. Some breaking news. It just broke this morning, so y'all make sure and check that out. It'll be coming up next right after this. But I love how everybody's just pretending that war's already started, like it's a conclusory statement that we're going to war. Is this what you voted for? As a matter of fact, yes, so far, this is what we voted for. You guys know, I'm anti-interventionist. I don't think we should get involved. Plus, we're also pretending that ground invasion is a predetermined outcome of this situation. Have we forgotten that what the U.S. has been doing traditionally, at least for the past couple of decades, is not ground invasion? Like ever since the Iraq War, we haven't done many ground invasions, if you will. It's all been just drone strikes and other, fighter jet strikes, things like that, airstrikes, if you will. Like, are we forgetting that they're trying to take out their nuclear facilities here? That doesn't necessarily involve. Now, we can get into all those discussions, but let's keep going and see what else Senator Rand Paul has to say, which, by the way, I pretty much totally agree with Rand Paul about. I wouldn't vote for going to war either, but let's keep going.
I want to play, before we finish, a clip which has gone viral today of Tucker Carlson grilling Senator Ted Cruz, one of your fellow senators. and then ask you about this afterwards.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay.
You're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe
we're
that...
carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
this is
Israel.
High stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war with Iran right now, people are listening.
Hey.
I didn't think that was Ted Cruz's finest hour, Senator. What were your thoughts?
You know, I think the gist of the conversation is over the unintended consequences of toppling a regime in a large country, you know? So you got 80, 90 million people in Iran. It's a big country. Compared to Afghanistan, probably at least 5 times bigger, if not more. So Afghanistan was a much smaller country, much less potent military, less sophisticated, and still Afghanistan was chaos. And the moment we left, it reverted back to the Stone Ages. And so really, what are the capabilities and what happens after? You know, these are the questions that we should always be asking. You know, once Gaddafi was gone in Libya, which we encouraged and allowed to happen, and really probably wouldn't have happened without our at least aerial assistance of the no-fly zone, is Libya a better place? In fact, all I hear in all these committees now is how we need to send weapons into the sub-Saharan regions, because weapons are coming out of Libya and supplying al-Qaeda, that Libya is all those weapons that Gaddafi used to control dispersed throughout sub-Sahara, and the things got actually worse after Gaddafi. It also sent a terrible message to the world, and this is one that still is resonating, that if you negotiate with the U.S., you give up your nuclear weapons in good faith, and then you still may get killed. And so it's just not a great lesson as far as negotiating. You can see why people don't want to negotiate away their nuclear rights, but people who have nuclear weapons look at the countries who do and say, well, maybe it's better to have them than not have them, because it looks like people won't mess with you if you have nuclear weapons. I'm not encouraging other countries to have it. I'm just saying that is their perception. But I think the discussion you were seeing there is of the unintended consequences throughout the Middle East. And you can see how people, when the Arab Spring happened, were like, oh, my goodness, this will be so great. It'll be hopeful. You know, all of these monarchies and dictatorships and sheikdoms be overthrown, and we'll have democracy throughout the Middle East. But it didn't turn out that way. And it turned out with millions of people dislocated, hundreds of thousands of people killed in dozens of countries. So I think in the end, that was what the debate looked to me to be about.
Would you have known how many people were in Iran?
Not to the person, but I knew as a big country, you know, between 80 and 100, I think I could get that close.
Donald Trump just finally said, somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Your thoughts?
I don't think anybody's really arguing that they should have a nuclear weapon. And see, this is where it's complicated when you argue about what we should do. So there's always a question is, if you bomb Tehran, which is happening right now, Israel's bombing Tehran, is it more or less likely that they go to a nuclear weapon? I think it's a completely open question. And I think there is a chance that Iran's response to this will be, if they're able to, you know, the discussion pre-end was they're weeks away from a nuclear weapon, which Netanyahu has said for the last 15 years, they're weeks away, we must do something, we have to attack them. So if they attack them and we stop them from getting the weapon, it'll be perceived as a heroic deed, and Israel will be applauded. If 2 weeks from now or a month from now, they announce they have a nuclear bomb, I think some people will say, attacking them wasn't the best. So you have to understand you don't know the outcome of these things, and there's a danger of what are the unintended consequences of this. And I don't think anybody really knows, but there definitely is a danger to it. And at the same time, I don't want to be someone who says, oh, the mullahs are just fine and the ayatollahs just fine. No, I think we should encourage freedom around the world and freedom movements around the world, but it doesn't mean we involve our soldiers and our weapons in every freedom movement around the world.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but He refused to throw any shade in the way of Ted Cruz. As a matter of fact, he refused to even discuss that conversation at all. He just said, oh, well, I think the intended consequences, but he brings up a pretty good point. Don't you think? What incentive is there for Iran to capitulate to the United States' demands on this and to Israel's demands on this? Don't build a nuclear weapon. Once again, what is their incentive structure here? To get regime change anyway, even though, it's like, what's going on? Even though we haven't engaged in regime change in Iran as of yet, at least recently, for all you people out there, at least recently. But I mean, is that the only incentive structure, is to not get bombed into oblivion if I don't build this nuclear weapon or whatever? It's like, there doesn't seem to be too many options for Iran in this situation. So it's like, well, what do you do at that point? Like, just abandon all your nuclear programs or whatever that they're technically not supposed to have, that they're technically not doing according to the intelligence community? We don't know, but let's get into the actual debate.
Yeah, I mean, Emily Austin, it's a fascinating split now of people that are ostensibly pro-Trump or were at the election, but now split down the middle. Those who are against Trump's current policy here: Candace Owens, Dave Smith, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones, Matt Walsh. Those in favor: Charlie Kirk, Lindsey Graham, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Mark Levine. I mean, it's extraordinary to see the conservative right in America basically cut in half here. And you've got to look at maybe the future of MAGA, if not Trump himself, might well hinge on what happens with this war in Iran.
Right. Well, first and foremost, I think time is the best teller. And there's a reason we elected Donald Trump in office, is because ultimately we have to just trust his decision making. The banter between the right wing doesn't bother me at all. I think it's very healthy to hear other perspectives, and it's healthy to engage in this dialogue in a very respectful manner, which I give credit to the right wingers for the most part, aside from the Tucker memes, which are very justified. It's very healthy to see that online. However, I want to confront what Scott was saying. I'm glad you're anti-war and you're anti-aggression, but at what point can you live like that, knowing that Iran is not? Everyone who's against striking Iran's nuclear sites, we'll talk about the regime change later, I just have to ask them, okay, for now you want to stay out of it. And yes, right now it's an imminent threat to Israel until it's not. Then it will become an imminent threat to America. And let me tell you, once the nuclear weapon's already developed, good luck combating that then. So why don't you take the smarter decision to take care of the issue before it becomes too late? Because I'm glad you're anti-war. I don't think Khomeini cares what you think.
But Emily, out of interest,
okay, well, thank you for your question. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, go on. You can answer. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Iran is no threat to the United States whatsoever, and no one who knows anything about it believes that. The biggest advances that they've made in the region in the last 25 years was when George W. Bush gave them Baghdad. Everyone knows they're in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have a safeguards agreement with the IAEA. Every bit of their civilian nuclear program is safeguarded. And this whole time, it has been a latent nuclear deterrent. Just like Japan, just like Germany, just like Brazil, they have proven that they have mastered the fuel cycle and have not made the decision to begin to attempt to make a nuclear weapon. That's a fact. You can scoff, but Tulsi Gabbard,
but it's also,
the director of national intelligence, just verified that in February and again in March. And apparently there was a new intelligence report just last week that said the same thing, that they are not even trying to make a nuclear weapon right now. So you can scoff, but that's basically just taking the place of you not knowing anything about the details.
Right,
here.
so let me jump in there.
Iran is a very weak country. They cannot threaten the USA. Not in the next 200 years could they threaten this country.
Okay, Scott, so let me counter that. Let me counter that slightly, because the atomic agency that you referenced there, their report made it clear that Iran has gone from a 3% uranium enrichment to 60% now. You need to get to 90% to make a nuclear bomb.
For medical research.
Yeah, well, hang on one second, mate.
I can explain all that.
Hang on one second. So there's clearly been a massive acceleration in their uranium enrichment program. Then it comes down to trust, whether you trust Iran not to take this further to a 90%.
Let me explain.
I would say that. Well, let me finish my question. So the atomic agency, I saw one of the people from the agency on Christiane Amanpour's show yesterday, And he was saying, in his estimation, he'd seen nothing to suggest that this was going to happen anytime soon. We've got this clip.
If there was some activity which was clandestine or hidden or away from our inspectors, we couldn't know. What we informed and what we reported was that we did not have, as in coincidence with some of the sources you mentioned there, that we did not have any proof of a systematic effort to move into a nuclear weapon.
Now, I thought that was significant, Scott, because certainly I could see. Well, hang on. Let me finish. Let me ask you a question. You know, I thought about this a lot before saying anything after the Israel attack, and concluded that I could see some justification for it based on that report. That clarification made me less certain of the justification. However, in the report itself, it then talks about Iran constantly lying and obfuscating, probably hiding stuff, not letting inspectors see stuff. And so it comes down, like I said earlier, doesn't it come down to a question of trust? Why would you trust the Iranian regime as far as you could throw them when it comes to potentially creating a bomb?
It doesn't come down to trust at all, and I'll beg the rest of the panel's forgiveness. I'll try to stay quiet later on in the hour here and let y'all talk. But just real quick so you understand, we had a deal in 2015 under which Iran exported every bit of their enriched uranium stockpile to France, who would then turn it into fuel rods and then ship it back to Iran to use in their reactor. Now, the nuclear reactor produces plutonium waste, but they don't have the facility required to reprocess plutonium to get all the impurities out to make weapons fuel. So they had no plutonium route to the bomb. The Russians would come and get the plutonium out of their reactor when it was full and time every couple of years or whatever. Now, their uranium route to the bomb, because they were exporting every bit of their enriched uranium out of the country, was they have this arbitrary timeline breakout period. They call it the breakout point, that it would take them 1 year if they decided to withdraw from the treaty, kick the inspectors out of the country, and begin to enrich weapons-grade uranium. It would take them a year to have enough to make one bomb with. Now, the new report that came out said that on top of that, it would take them another couple of years to have an actual warhead ready to do anything with it. And I'm sorry this is complicated, but I know people can follow on this if you know anything about the history here. Let me explain real quick now that the Nagasaki bomb was a implosion bomb, a plutonium implosion bomb. Which is the type of bomb that can be miniaturized and fit to a missile. But the Hiroshima bomb was a simple gun-type nuke, a uranium nuke, which is a humongous thing. Iran could never fit that on a missile or deliver it to Israel or the United States in a million years. And so if they had a single gun-type nuke or two, it would essentially be to test off a demonstration round in the desert to show that they have one, but it still would not make them an offensive threat to anyone. And as the CIA concluded in 2007, they abandoned all research into a weapons program, even bothering to look into it in 2003 when America got rid of Saddam Hussein for them. And so the fact that they've had now, I'm sorry, get to your point. Donald Trump left the treaty or the agreement in 2018. Now, Piers, it's complicated, but according to the agreement, Iran is allowed to stop abiding by some of the restrictions in it if America breaks our side of the deal. They actually are still within the larger agreement, even while ceasing to abide by some parts of it. Now, that 60% enriched uranium stockpile that they built up is clearly, just as it was in the Obama years, is clearly simply a card to play in negotiations to deal away. That uranium is there to give up if they can get America to back down and lift the sanctions. That's all it is. If they wanted to make weapons-grade uranium, they could have made weapons-grade uranium. They weren't doing that. They're getting closer because it's a card to play in negotiations. And now and one last point, and then I swear I'll stop, and you made this point. Nothing changed. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, says nothing changed. They did not break out toward a nuclear weapon. There was no casus belli here, even if you accepted the premise that you could launch a preemptive war to prevent them from getting a nuke, which is a whole other argument. But even if you accept that premise, nothing had changed in Iran other than the timeline, the arbitrary timeline of Trump's demand had expired, and you hear Trump and the rest of the hawks trying to conflate having a nuclear program at all with being on the verge of achieving a nuclear weapons capability. And this is what George W. Bush called shorthanding it. In other words, they just imply a bunch of lies because they can't explain what they mean.
That's a pretty fascinating argument that I haven't heard yet. You know, the reason that they're enriching up to 60% is as a negotiating tactic, doing the same thing that Trump does. You know, the big ask. They're doing this, threatening this, and then, hey, let's go to the negotiating table. But, you know, I would counter that with, okay, so why did they just throw away all those negotiations? Why did they run out the clock? I mean, he's totally right about the technology that's being used on this. It's old school technology. It's a fission bomb, not a fusion bomb, which America and Russia and all the nuclear powers, they have fission bombs, which use plutonium, I believe, not uranium. Uranium is really old school technology. That's the very first, and he said, he's right. Plus, you also got to think about this. If they were to design a bomb, they haven't tested it yet. We can detect those tests. I mean, we've made significant technological gains in the past to be able to detect nuclear bomb detonations, for crying out loud. So we would be able to detect these seismic detectors, and there's satellites that watch over all this stuff. It's amazing, some of the technology. And, you know, I can't really explain all the technology all that well. I just know it exists. So I know that if they were to test a bomb, we would know about it. And they haven't tested a bomb. So if they were to build a bomb, hang on just a second. They would be just running into this situation with a freaking blindfold on, not knowing exactly if it's going to work or not. Now, the fear of this is they give some of this fissile material, or whatever you want to call it, to like the Houthi rebels or one of these terrorist organizations, and they go and irradiate cities all over the place, right? That's the fear, I think. I don't really think the fear that Iran, it's not a credible fear, at least, that they're going to strap a warhead to a ICBM or something like that and launch that at Washington, D.C. I don't think that's what the fear is, even though there's a lot of fear-mongering around that, right? There's a lot of people fear-mongering around that. You know, I love this other argument also, that because MAGA has a disagreement about something, that, oh, they're falling apart. Oh, it's in shambles. It's in chaos, folks. No, this is what democracy looks like. Once again, I make that argument all the time as well. That's how Piers started this thing off. Oh, well, it looks like MAGA is breaking apart here. No, they're not, because we know what the alternative is. By God, we know what the alternative is. Let's keep going.
Israel knows it needs to wipe Hamas out. I mean, you're not born hating. You're taught to hate. You're taught to be racist. And a lot of these poor kids that are raised around Hamas, all they know is cut the heads off the dirty Jews. That's exactly what they're saying. I mean, it's horrible, the words that they use. I'm upset with myself just for saying that right now. But that's what they're teaching them. And like, my question too is, okay, a two-party state. Here's a serious question. You get Palestine. Who's gonna lead it? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Hamas. You're getting more of the same. You need to have real leadership. And again, with the conversations we're having right now, I mean, first of all, you know, I've been to Sadr City. I've been to Najaf. I'm definitely going to read Scott's book, because I think it is important to try to. You shouldn't be sitting in a room with people that just agree in an echo chamber. I'm very interested now to reading that. If were these EFPs that killed a lot of Americans made in Iraq? Neither here nor there. I mean, if you're trying to tell me that a lot of American kids weren't blown up and killed and maimed and watch their friends blown in half, and now just a ton of traumatic brain injury, and I've seen it. It's there. It's real.
No, I'm just saying Iran didn't do it. I'm only saying Iran didn't do it. I'm not challenging the deaths and the chaos of that war. It was terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I saw it. Did you see it?
From here, and
no,
it was bad.
I'll just take your silence
here.
as no, you didn't see it. But I'm just saying it's all based on their religion and the end of their times. There's so much going on. You know what part of the issue too with all these wars? The first Gulf War. Hey, go back to Vietnam. Go back to Korea. The first Gulf War, the second Gulf War. Why did we bomb Bosnia? Then go into Afghanistan. You know, obviously we know why we went into Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia. You know who's been watching us the entire time? China.
Rob, you know, the last clip that I saw of you before today's show was a short clip of you on the Sean Ryan show talking about how you killed this guy in his house because he went for a gun. And then later on, you thought to yourself, what was I doing there? Why did I kill this guy? I wonder if he was funny. I wonder if we could have had a drink. Because and the way you finished the story, because you believe George Bush's lies. He set you on a fool's errand, to fight for Iran in Iraq War II that whole time. My friend, you should be over it by now. I can't understand how you could be rallying behind the war party. You're the one that betrayed.
I don't want to go to war too. Like I said, after 9/11, I believed
Unless
anything,
I
and that's what our
misunderstood you.
industrial complex did. I mean, Iraq is so complicated. We never should have invaded. We shouldn't have left how we did. We formed ISIS. But yeah, I mean, that realization of a dude that I shot that I didn't even know because he went for a gun. He went for a gun because I was his worst nightmare in his room at 2 a.m. simply because George Bush didn't like what Saddam Hussein said about his dad. I'm admitting that right now. I mean, I'm not on here as some pro-war guy. I'd love it if it all ended. The conversations need to be had. And I mean, we've proven for a long, long time that bombs and bullets aren't exactly working. And it's the same story every single time. They're so close. We got to bomb them. Look, I mean, look at Gaddafi was running Libya. He gave up his nukes. We went in there. We made up the Arab Spring, bombed him, killed him. And all of a sudden there's open slave markets. This war stuff's not really working. I'm not a pro-war guy.
Can I make a point here? The reason to oppose war is not because it doesn't work. It's because you have no right to do it. You had no right as an illegal aggressor to invade Iraq. That was based on a lie, and the U.S. had no right to bomb it. Just as Israel has no right to bomb Iran, which is not threatening Israel, Israel has no right to occupy the people of Palestine. It only has the obligation to stop occupying them. And on that point, I've been to Gaza. I'm Jewish myself. I was treated very well. I met children. They're not taught to hate. They're just taught to have their eyes open and see what's in front of them.
What road are you living on?
Israeli occupation that has denied them their basic rights. It's put them in a cage. If you don't want Hamas there, don't put them under one of the most sadistic military occupations in the world, in which Israel controls even what kind of food people can eat, which now has been reduced to Holocaust levels. 20 years ago, that was at the levels where Israel was counting the calories, literally, so that they would give the people of Gaza just enough food so there wouldn't be a full-blown starvation crisis. One Israeli official referred to this as putting them on a diet. That's called sadism, and it's the root cause of all problems in the Middle East. If you don't want wars, if you don't want conflict, the first place to start is with our aggression, our tyranny. And the fundamental tyranny that threatens everybody is Israel's oppression and now mass murder of the Palestinian people.
Okay, I want to play, Emily,
Can I ask a question really quickly here? Since other than the Palestinians electing Hamas, Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. If that goes away like you want it to, where are all the homosexuals and trans going to go? Because that's the only place in the Middle East they're welcome.
Okay, first of all, this notion that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, try telling that to the millions of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza who have been ruled by Israel for decades now and can't vote for their leaders, can't even move without Israeli permission, who die at checkpoints because Israel denies them medical care, who lack food and water. Right now in Gaza, there's literally a starvation crisis because Israel is controlling everything that comes in with the starvation siege. This notion that Israel is a democracy is a complete lie. Yes, it's a democracy nominally internally for the people that have Israeli citizenship, but not for the millions of Palestinians that it rules over in the West Bank and Gaza. It's not a democracy, it's a tyranny for them.
All right, Emily, I want to play, hang on. I want to play a clip. This is President Trump today talking about Iran.
Okay, so that one guy's clearly just deranged with Israel-Palestine. Like, what is he even talking about? The kids, they're not trained to hate. What? That's like just absurd. They most certainly are. We've seen the videos, for crying out loud. Like, are you kidding me with this? But, the war hero, he brings up a really, really good point. Iran is an extreme Islamist fundamentalist nation, for goodness sakes. What do they do? Like, what happens if, the government is toppled? What goes on? Like, there's many people that speculate, we could see ISIS, like something similar to ISIS, like we've never seen before. Take ISIS and multiply that by 100, just simply due to the population. Now, some of the population over there's been a lot of polls that show, half to 60%, they don't like the current regime. They're not these extremists or whatever. But, that still leaves, what, about 40 million people? That's a lot, folks. That's a whole lot. That entire region would just devolve into chaos. Would just utter anarchy. is what it would be, unless you would have a government. I think that's why regime change is a bad idea. Right. And I also think, once again, like, they're getting to all these conclusory ideas here that it's just going to be an invasion and it's going to be regime change instead of just surgical strikes on these nuclear facilities, for goodness sakes. Like, I really think that that's going to be the extent of this. Now, they say, that those GBU-57, the bunker busters, or whatever, the MOPs, if you will, as they are colloquially referred to, are not enough. They are designed to penetrate, or they're fully capable of penetrating up to 200 feet underground. And that Fordo facility, I believe it's 300 feet under the ground. So get this, folks. This is fascinating. So to be able to actually even reach that target, 300 feet underground, you would have to have one of these missiles go in, dig itself down to 200 feet, detonate, and right as it detonates, a second one hit the exact same spot and then penetrate even further and detonate, right? But then this facility is widespread, so you would need another one after that to go in and penetrate all the way into it and then blow up and destroy. Now, does any of this sound familiar to anybody? Sound like a movie, doesn't it? Maybe Top Gun Maverick-esque, if you will. I just find that fascinating. What's also fascinating about that is that the so-called country, the aggressor country or whatever in that movie, was supposedly Iran, right? A mountainous desert nation of Arabs or whatever, Persians, whatever you want to call them. I just find all this to be, like, who is writing reality? Seriously. Like, are we in a simulation? Did we just so happen to fall into some sort of isekai or something like that? Like, if you get the reference, you get the reference. But are we living in a simulation? Or does Hollywood have clairvoyant powers? It's my question for the comments. Let's keep going.
Hang on. I want to play a clip. This is President Trump today talking about Iran. Watch this.
President, what do you say to the Supreme Leader of Iran who says that they will not surrender?
Say good luck.
And what is the end game?
Say it? I know the patience run out. It's already run out. That's why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah, they had 60 days and a big, 60 days, plenty of time. And they made a mistake. Honestly, they made a mistake. Their country's in ruins. So many people are dead that shouldn't be dead. It's a very sad thing.
So, Emily, Donald Trump is about to make possibly the most consequential decision of his life. This is a man who's been persistently anti-war in his rhetoric, wanting to end wars, not start them, proud of the fact that in his first term he didn't start any significant war. But here he might be actively engaging in starting an American war, albeit with Israel, against Iran. Do you not feel, after what happened with Iraq, after what happened with Afghanistan, do you not feel this is a massive roll of the dice? And that Tucker Carlson, in his pretty apocalyptic warning, someone who's a pro-Trump guy, voted for Trump, says this could end his presidency.
It's very dramatic and hysterical, if you ask me. Before I answer that question, I just want to point out that Aaron believes America has no right to interject into what's happening in Iran, but Hamas has the right to pull in October 7th and invade Israel because of the false narrative that they're occupied. So now, moving on from that, I watched what Trump said this morning. I watched it live, actually. And I feel like the issue here is that everyone's equivocating what's happening in Iran to Iraq and Afghanistan. I'd argue that the people of Iran, the Persian people, are a bit more sophisticated than what Iraq was and what Afghanistan was, a little bit more secular. Half of them are resisting the regime, are calling for a regime change. Do I think it's America's burden to reassure that if they have a new whatever you want to call it, supreme leader, president, hopefully something more democratic? No. However, I do believe that at the very least, if we get rid of their nuclear facilities, the whole world is a better place. Trust me, the entire Middle East will be happy. UAE, Saudi, all the countries that are going more Western will be thanking us for that. And at the very best, within Iran, once it's in ruins, as Trump said, it won't be in ruins. We'll get a B-2 bomb. But once they have the opportunity to, they can overthrow the regime and state what it was pre-79. They don't need to be oppressed by their own anymore. The Iranian people are taking the streets. They're not chanting death to America anymore. They're chanting death to the dictator. So I feel like they're ready for this change. And it's not Iraq and it's not Afghanistan.
I mean, the parallel with Iraq, though, I would say is quite clear in that that was fought on what turned out to be an entirely false pretext that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And here there is a belief put out by Prime Minister Netanyahu that Iran is imminently about to create a nuclear bomb, but nobody else outside of Israel.
He said that then, too.
Yeah, but nobody else outside of Israel seems to agree. I mean, Scott, this is the dilemma for Donald Trump, is that there is a part of his support that's dragging him into engaging in this war, but there's another.
Due diligence? Come on, he's not that naive.
Well, the problem is that all those whose specific job it is to do that due diligence are saying that Iran is nowhere near it. And that's what would stop me in my tracks if I was president of the United States, is like, am I going to believe the Israelis, led by Netanyahu, who's been saying this for decades, without actual evidence that it's about to create a bomb, or not?
I don't think we know whether or not he was presented with evidence by Netanyahu. I don't think Trump shows all of the reports to every single person in the United States or abroad. I really have a very hard time believing Netanyahu called him, said, hey, bro, trust me, they have a nuclear weapon. And Trump was like, yeah, let's get involved. I think we know it's a little bit more.
That's exactly what happened, given that Trump is ignoring what his own director of national intelligence said, which has been bolstered in recent days by leaks to CNN and the New York Times, in which as Scott mentioned earlier, even the latest intelligence reports say the same thing. And there was no convincing evidence provided by Israel. This is basically the Iraq WMD hoax, wherein Dick Cheney, got the intelligence. He knew there was no Iraq WMD, so he ordered it to be fabricated, including through torture. This is basically the Iraq WMD hoax, except this time Trump isn't bothering to fabricate. He's just outsourcing the job to Israel.
Okay, Scott. And like I said, this is a hell of a roll of the dice if Trump pulls the trigger on getting involved in this. I mean, I do think it's going to be extraordinarily consequential.
Yeah. Well, and look, he should not get involved at all, and Israel should call it off right now, short of regime change. The idea that, and this reminds me of the funniest thing that Nancy Mace said in that interview was, oh, yeah, well, you know what, we'll just kill the regime, and then the people will rise up, and, they'll just figure it out. It'll be fine. This is exactly what I'll never forget Representative Bob Dornan in 2011 talking about how, yes, we should support al-Qaeda to overthrow the government in Damascus, Syria, because, well, we don't know who's going to replace him, but I'm sure someone will come to the fore, he said. And now who came to the fore? First, the Islamic State bin Ladenite caliphate that was so bad that America had to launch Iraq War III to destroy it again, in alliance with Iran, by the way, providing them direct air cover as they took back to Crete. But anyway, and then after that, now al-Qaeda has broken out of the Idlib province, the al-Nusra Front, and sacked Damascus last December, and are the ruling regime there, now recognized by Donald Trump. That's who came to the fore in Syria when America got rid of the secular Alawite dictatorship. Iran is different. Yes, it's much more sophisticated. You mean their population is almost 100 million people, and that there are Sunni Arabs and Shiite Persians and Azeris and Baluchs and all kinds of different people that you've never heard of, with all of their own factional differences, religious and sectarian differences, and historical grudges, who are sure to go to bloody civil war to take over. You say, oh, there's foreigners waiting to come in. It'll be just like before 79 when they were free? You mean when they were under the American-backed sock puppet dictator, the Shah Reza Pahlavi, which is who they're talking about parachuting his son in now. Maybe that's all Trump meant, Pierce, when he gave that speech in Qatar denouncing neoconservatism. He said, forget democracy. Maybe he just meant we're going to reinstall His Royal Majesty, His Highness, to be the iron-fisted monarch of Persia again. Anyone listening to this who thinks that that is credible, that that's going to work, that any new regime America installs there is not going to immediately face a vast insurgency from the people of that vast and mountainous country, are insane. Okay, you need to get your head checked. Every one of you people.
Let me give the...
I mean, I like Scott. You know, he always brings the facts. He always brings the info. He always brings the background information that we need to make, to form our opinions on these issues, right? Especially these world issues outside of the United States. It's always got a wealth of knowledge that I just love. But once again, this is where we're kind of getting into the conclusory brain thoughts here that we're just going to invade. That's already concluded that's what's going to happen. It seems like nobody's considering just airstrikes, and that's it. Maybe one or two, right? One or two major strikes, a couple of B-2 bombers go in and strike this facility and take it out, and then we negotiate. Maybe that's naive. Maybe it is. But who in the hell, when has Trump ever said anything about regime change? When has he ever said anything about any sort of ground invasion? He hasn't. He hasn't mentioned drone strikes. He hasn't mentioned striking them at all. Like, he's kind of said, I'm not going to rule it out. That's about it. That's seriously about it. So far, Israel is doing a pretty good job of taking out Tehran, right? Taking out their air defense systems, taking out their nuclear facilities, their nuclear scientists, for crying out loud. Like, we might not have to get involved at all. Now, they're not going to take out Fordo, though. I'll be honest about that. I just love it because he's totally right. If we tried to go in there and topple the government, that's going to be a bloody war. That is a mountainous nation. It's going to be Afghanistan times 100. It would take decades to get done, and we would never get it done, right? Once we took them over, whatever terrorist group that coalesced after we came in, whatever insurgency that is, they would just immediately take over right back as soon as we left. And it would be disastrous, once again, folks. But it's just insane to think that we're to that point where these people are just concluding that that's going to happen, it seems like. Oh, this is one of the most consequential decisions Donald Trump has made. Like, what? Like, we haven't done anything, for goodness sakes. What I find also fascinating is they mentioned Tulsi Gabbard a lot. How she come in and she said,
the IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program. In the past year, we've seen an erosion of a decades-long taboo in Iran on discussing nuclear weapons in public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest levels and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. Iran will likely continue efforts to counter Israel and press for U.S. military withdrawal from the region by aiding, arming, and helping to reconstitute its loose consortium of like-minded terrorists and militant actors, which it refers to as its axis of resistance.
Well, apparently, yeah, that's not true anymore. Check this out. Tulsi Gabbard brutally mocked over religion after U-turn on Iran nuclear threat. Now, once again, this is people absorbing what somebody says and then interpreting in their own fashion. If you listen to what Tulsi Gabbard said, she didn't say that they're not a threat. She just said that they do not appear to be building a nuclear bomb. She didn't mention anything about the enriching of uranium, none of that stuff. She just said that's what the intelligence community is saying. That's it. And people interpret that as, oh, but they're not building a bomb. There's no credible threat over here, so we don't need to do anything. Don't freaking worry about it. Well, that's not what she said, is it? It's not really what she said. It's just the same thing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump come out the other day and was talking about, the problem with the ICE raids at the farms and the businesses, the hotels, and all that other stuff. He said there's a problem. A lot of people are getting fired, and these businesses are having issues replacing these people. He said something needs to be done about that. What did the corporate press do? Oh, Donald Trump's reversing his immigration policy. He's stopping raids on farms. Big headlines everywhere. Which, that's not what he said. He said, this is a problem, and we need to do something about it. He didn't say what that resolution would be. Once again, Tulsi Gabbard. That was not a conclusive statement, for goodness sakes. That is just saying that they don't believe that they're not building a bomb. That doesn't mean that they're not building a bomb in secret. Once again, that's what a lot of people seem to be ignoring. That's why I didn't like that's why I didn't like that agreement that Barack Obama came up with, the nuclear agreement or whatever it was called. I forget right off the top of my head, the IAEA or whatever it was. Sorry, I forget. But that's why I didn't like that, because it's a very mountainous nation. They've got a lot of underground facilities. Who is to say? Like that clip on that one video, that guy said, you know, if there was some clandestine operation going on, we would know about it. That is the height of arrogance. How do you know that you would know about it if they're hiding it from you, my guy? Like, seriously, like, look, I understand. If you want to say, well, if they tested a bomb, we would know. Sure. But that doesn't mean that they're not building one. Once again, folks, if they're going to hide, how do we know that they're not just hiding? How do we know that there's not a centrifuge somewhere that's enriching all the way up to 90% to weapons grade, and they're not attempting to build some sort of nuke? How do we know they haven't surpassed that technology and gotten into plutonium and thermonuclear weapons? How do we know that? We don't know that. You can have all the inspectors in the country that you want. If they have a hidden facility that we have no idea exists, once again, it's a mountainous nation, folks. That's what a lot of people don't seem to think about that. It's wild. They're just ignoring that for some reason. I'm sorry, but that's a credible line of thinking, to think that they would do something in secret, for goodness sakes. Like, we built the nuclear bomb originally in secret. Nobody knew about it. Right? We had Russian spies almost make it out of the country at the time. They ended up getting the technology from us later down the road, but before 1945, nobody knew anything that we were building some sort of atomic weapon, as they called them back then, atomic bomb. I didn't know until we sprung it upon Japan, for goodness sakes. I mean, imagine waking up to that. That's a scary thought, but I think I've rambled on for long enough on this one, y'all. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here and all that good goobly gobbly stuff. Sign up, become a member. Do me that big favor. I see you, by the way. Just click on that join button and read it. That's all I ask. Just click the join button, read it, see what you think. Y'all let me know. Y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.